Today we're going to make some double chocolate cream cheese brownies. Now these take a while because there's a lot of cooling time throughout this recipe. But we're going to start off with, I have a pan on the stove. I have 8 ounces of bittersweet chocolate, not semi-sweet, not unsweetened, but bittersweet. So it's got a little bit of sugar. This is a 60% cacao in it. And then I have a stick and a half or 12 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to turn this on medium low and just wait for the chocolate to melt. We're going to stir the butter and chocolate together. Now, the reason we call it a double chocolate is we're going to start with a base that has bittersweet chocolate in it. We're going to have a creamy and smooth cream cheese layer in the middle, and then a semi-sweet chocolate ganache on the top. But for now, all we're doing is melting this. I'm doing it on my stove. You can do it in the microwave. You can do a double boiler. I'm doing it straight on my stove to create fewer dishes for my lovely husband who does all of my dishes when I make anything. So once this all melts and gets smooth, we're going to pour it into this bowl over here and let it sit for about 10 minutes to cool down before we add our sugar and eggs. If we don't let it cool, those eggs are going to curdle and start to cook, and you'll have tiny pieces of scrambled eggs in the middle of your brownies, and that does not sound good, even a little. So I've got a little bit of butter and chocolate in the middle of my whisk. Force out with my little spatula. And I'm going to stir with my spatula for a little while until we get more of the clumps out, and then I'll go back to the whisk. So you want to make sure that your heat is on medium-low. If it's too high, you'll scald the chocolate before you get it all melted, and it'll turn. And if you've ever had scalded chocolate, it does not taste good. It gets this really bitter taste to it beyond what the bittersweet is. All right, as you can see, it's really smooth. So that means we're done. Turn that off. I'm just going to take my spatula and spoon all of it into this bowl. We're going to let it cool for about 10-15 minutes, and then we will be back to mix our brownies. We have let our chocolate and butter cool for about 10 minutes. I've also preheated our oven to 350 degrees. Now I'm going to add 1.5 cups of sugar. And my 4 eggs that are at room temperature. That's very important. Then I have a teaspoon of vanilla. Add in real quick. And then I'm going to switch from my whisk to my spatula for the next part. So I'm going to get all my chocolate off of there. Go back to our spatula. And I'm going to stir in 1 cup of flour and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And the reason I switched to my spatula is because we are trying to just mix until it's combined, not over mix. You don't want to release too much of that gluten or the brownies are not yummy. So it's just a simple stir. And then we are going to pour in a cup of walnut pieces. So I have a nut grinder like this that I just put nuts in the top of, and then it'll measure out to the cup that I want. I did a coarse chop. If you don't like the feel of walnuts in your mouth, which I don't normally, do a fine chop, or you can leave these out altogether. They're not a necessity. So I got a cup of walnuts. We're just going to fold those in. And then I have my pan. I have a 10 by 10 pan. If you want to use a 9 by 13, you can. This is going to be a little thicker on the brownies and the rest of it because I'm using a 10 by 10 pan. If you want it thinner, spread it out, get a larger pan. So, pouring in the brownie mix. I'm going to take the back end of my spatula and just spread it out to make sure that we get into all the corners. Like that. Now we're going to slide this into a 350-degree oven for about 22 to 25 minutes. So our brownies took about 27 minutes in the oven, and now we are going to let them cool. I'm going to leave them on the counter for about an hour, and then I'm going to pop them in the refrigerator for an hour so they are completely cold when we add our cream cheese layer. Our brownies have cooled overnight, so now we're going to make our cream cheese layer. I have 2 sticks or 16 ounces of cream cheese that is softened in my mixer. I'm going to add to that 4 tablespoons or half a stick of butter that is also softened to room temperature. And then we're going to add 3 cups of powdered sugar. I'm going to start this on low just to get everything mixed together. And then we'll turn it to high. And we're going to beat this on high for about 3 minutes just to get everything fully incorporated and get a light, fluffy mixture. So our cream cheese, butter, powdered sugar mixture is light and fluffy. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste. I didn't use extract this time because I didn't want to thin out that cream cheese layer. And the consistency of extract makes it just slightly thinner. So you can use the vanilla extract. It's not going to harm it in any way if you don't have vanilla bean paste. I also like the way that the vanilla bean paste has those little flecks of vanilla inside. It gives it just a touch of, I don't know, oomph. So 1 teaspoon, and now we're going to turn this back on again and just beat it until it's combined. About a minute. All right, the minute is up. Now, I'm going to do what I always do. First, I've got some of that vanilla bean paste on the side, so we're going to incorporate that in. And then I'm going to stir to make sure that we get everything completely combined and there's not like a giant chunk of cream cheese at the bottom that we're missing. And I don't know if you can see the flecks of vanilla inside the cream cheese mixture that just give it a little depth. But like I said, you can use regular plain vanilla if that's what you have and that's what you want to use. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is pour this on top of the brownies. And then I'm going to take my offset spatula, and I'm just going to make sure we get into all of the corners, the nooks and crannies, so that it's perfectly even, or as close to perfectly even as we can get. There we are. Now we're going to put this in the refrigerator. It needs to refrigerate for at least 2 hours so that the cream cheese can set before we add our ganache layer. So the second chocolate that is in our double chocolate cream cheese brownies is our chocolate ganache layer. So in my saucepan I have 2 tablespoons of butter, and then I have 6 ounces measured out of semi-sweet chocolate. I'm going to heat that over low heat, very low heat, with a half of a cup of heavy cream. And we're going to wait till that all melts together and smooths out. It's going to be about 5 to 7 minutes while we let it cook. If you notice, smooth, no chunks of chocolate anywhere. Everything is melted. So now we're just going to turn off the heat. I'm going to add a tablespoon of corn syrup. Whisk that in. And then we're going to let this cool to room temperature. If we add it too quickly to our cream cheese layer, it'll melt the cream cheese. We don't want that. So we're going to let it cool for about 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and spread it over our cream cheese layer. So our ganache has cooled and our cream cheese layer has hardened. So what we're going to do is just pour the ganache over. And then once again, I'm going to take my offset spatula and just spread it around to make sure we get every inch of that cream cheese layer covered. And then we're going to put these back in the refrigerator for another at least 3 hours or overnight. And then we will cut them and garnish them with a little bit of sea salt. And there we are. So our ganache cooled on our brownies overnight in our refrigerator. So the last step is to cut them up, which we've done, and then sprinkle with just a tiny bit of sea salt. And there you are, ready to serve.